It had been 4 years since I last saw my sister, and almost 6 since I'd seen Ethan. I remember him as a skinny, wild-haired boy who ran around the backyard with a plastic sword and a cape. Now he was a grown man, 23, tall, calm, and self-contained in a way that made me feel exposed. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected him. I'd come to Toronto to escape. The divorce had gutted me, 12 years gone. My ex moved on fast. I hadn't. New York felt empty, the apartment even more so. So when my sister insisted I visit for a long weekend, I said yes. I didn't think much of it. I packed light, brought a bottle of wine, and told myself this was just family time. Simple. Safe. The house was warm when I arrived. Cinnamon candles burning, soft music in the background, snow falling thick outside the windows. My sister wrapped me in a hug that lasted longer than usual. Ethan stood behind her, hands in his pockets. I almost didn't recognize him. His voice was deeper, his eyes sharper, but they held something familiar, like a secret we both hadn't told yet. We hugged, polite at first. Then, strangely, he didn't let go right away. "You look different," he said. I smiled. "So do you. Taller. Less chaotic." He laughed, but there was something else in the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something. That night, after dinner, my sister went to bed early. The house had that late-night stillness, where every sound feels louder than it should. I stayed in the living room, sipping tea, staring into the fireplace. Ethan joined me, sitting on the opposite end of the couch. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. About life, about how confusing your 20s can be, about how he felt behind everyone else, stuck in a city he didn't love, unsure of what came next. "I always felt like you got me," he said suddenly. "Even when I was a kid. Like, you saw through all the nonsense." I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that second, I realized how long it had been since anyone had said something that made me feel seen. Not as a mother, not as a sister, not as someone's ex-wife, but just me. I didn't say much back. Just smiled and changed the subject. But something shifted that night. A glance too long. A pause too heavy. I told myself it was nothing. Just a late-night conversation, blurry with wine and warmth. But as I lay awake upstairs, replaying our talk in my mind, I felt it. A pulse I hadn't felt in years. And somewhere deep inside, I already knew, this wasn't going to stay simple. The next morning, he barely looked at me. He was polite, casual, joking with his mom as if the night before never happened. I played along, but inside, I was unsettled. I kept asking myself if I'd imagined it, if the weight in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, had just been nostalgia. Maybe I was just tired. Or lonely. Or both. Later that day, he asked if I wanted to take a walk. My sister was heading out to meet a friend, so it was just the two of us. We strolled through the snow-covered park near the house, our boots crunching underfoot, the world strangely quiet. He talked about feeling stuck in Toronto, about how he wanted more out of life. Creatively, emotionally. I told him about my failed marriage, about how being alone didn't scare me as much as being forgotten. He listened so intently, so fully, it disarmed me. We sat on a bench, steam rising from our coffee cups, silence falling between us. Then, almost too casually, he said, "You know what I wish?" I looked over. "What?" He didn't hesitate. "I wish you weren't my aunt." I didn't respond right away. I felt my breath catch, and for a moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat. I laughed it off, said, "That's a strange thing to say." He shrugged, looking away. "I mean, not really. You're not really my aunt. Not by blood. Not by how it feels." I changed the subject fast, but my hands trembled inside my gloves. That evening, he apologized. Said he was tired, had too much coffee, didn't mean to make things weird. I told him it was fine, that nothing was weird. But it was. Everything was. And I hated how much I liked it. Over the next 2 days, he was careful. Friendly, distant, measured. But when we were alone, the air between us changed. There was always a second too long before he looked away, a softness in his tone only I heard. I caught myself watching him, his hands, his mouth, the way he ran them through his hair when he was thinking. It was wrong. I knew that. But it didn't stop the wanting. I left Toronto with a hug that lingered too long and a heart beating faster than it should. Back in New York, everything felt dull. Cold. I tried to forget that moment in the park, tried to convince myself it was nothing. But late at night, his voice would echo in my head. Then, a month later, he messaged me. He'd been accepted to an art program in the city. He was moving to New York. He asked if he could stay with me for a while until he found a place. I stared at that message for a long time. I could have said no. Should have. But I didn't. I said yes. He arrived with a suitcase, a duffel bag, and a smile that didn't quite hide his nerves. I kept everything casual, set him up in the guest room, gave him the house key, told him to treat the place like home. He was respectful, grateful, even a little reserved at first. But the tension we had buried in Canada hadn't disappeared. It had just changed zip codes. Living together blurred the lines quickly. We shared meals, coffee in the mornings, takeout in front of the TV at night. He talked about his classes, showed me his photography, images that were raw, intimate, and aching with emotion. One night, as I flipped through his portfolio, I saw a photo of me, taken during our walk. I didn't even know he'd captured it. I looked peaceful in it, like someone worth loving. I hadn't seen myself that way in a long time. There was no grand moment, no dramatic confession. It happened gradually, in the quiet spaces between words. The way he started sitting closer. The way my hand brushed his and didn't pull away. The way we lingered a little too long in silences. The night it happened, we were watching a movie. Something romantic, forgettable. I remember laughing at a line, and when I turned to him, his eyes were already on me. He said my name once, like a question. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When he leaned in, everything inside me screamed to stop. But I didn't move. When he kissed me, it wasn't wild or rushed. It was slow, careful, as if he knew this could break us both. And still, I let it happen. Not out of impulse, but out of something far more dangerous, longing. Afterward, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. We just sat there, the room spinning with silence, hearts pounding too loud. He fell asleep on the couch beside me, his head on my shoulder. I didn't move for hours. The next morning, I avoided his eyes. I made coffee like nothing happened. He didn't say much, but he stayed close, almost like he was afraid I'd vanish. I didn't vanish. But something inside me did. The guilt came in waves. Not for what we did, but for what it meant. I kept replaying the night in my mind, wondering what kind of woman I had become. I wasn't his blood. But he was still him. Still the boy who once called me auntie. Still the person I should have protected from this version of me. I told myself it was a mistake. That it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Not often. Not openly. But enough. Enough to blur right and wrong until they were just words I used to understand. He looked at me like I was the only thing that made sense in his world. And maybe that's why I let it continue, because for once, someone wanted me not out of need or habit, but out of pure, desperate choice. And I wasn't ready to let that go. The shift came quietly. No arguments. No confessions. Just small silences that grew longer with each passing day. He stayed out later, started mentioning classmates, new friends, places he wanted to explore on his own. I told myself it was natural, that he was settling in. But part of me knew he was stepping away, gently but deliberately. One morning, he mentioned finding a place with a few friends from his program. He said it like it was a practical choice, but I felt the goodbye inside it. I nodded, pretending it made sense. He gave me a quick glance, like he was waiting for me to ask him to stay. I didn't. Because I couldn't offer him a future built on something so fragile. So unspoken. We were living in a version of time that couldn't last. The days before he left were strange. Polite, distant, like two people who shared a dream they were trying to forget. He packed slowly, deliberately, as if hoping I'd change my mind. But I stayed quiet. I had no right to ask him for more. Whatever we had wasn't sustainable. It wasn't wrong in the way people love to label things. It was wrong because it could never be anything real. No family gathering, no holiday dinner, no future would ever let us live that out loud. The morning he left, he stood at the door with his bag over his shoulder. He looked older, sadder, maybe stronger. "You were my first real love," he said softly. "I don't think I'll ever forget that." I swallowed hard and replied, "You're going to do great things. Just don't carry this with you like a weight. Let it be what it was." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We hugged for a long time, and when he stepped away, I knew it was over. Not just between us, but the version of myself that allowed it. I spent the evening cleaning up the apartment, finding traces of him in the little things. His cologne in the hallway, a sketchbook under the couch, a pair of socks still in the dryer. I folded them all neatly, then tucked them away like secrets I'd never speak of again. He didn't call. I didn't reach out. That silence wasn't punishment. It was mercy. It was what we owed each other after stepping into something neither of us were ready for. And even now, when his name comes up in conversation or his photos appear online, I smile quietly. He looks happy. Free. I don't regret saying yes. I regret that it had to end in silence. I regret that love, when it finally found me, arrived in a shape I couldn't hold on to. But for a little while, I was seen. I was wanted. I was alive in a way I thought I'd forgotten how to be. And maybe that was enough.